Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today we're going to continue our work on building the Walthers Cornerstone background building kit. So at this point we've got all the painting done except for one thing that I'll show you here in a minute. And then we'll move on to putting all of these windows in place and the doors and getting it ready for the final construction. And that will come in another video because this again ran on a bit longer than I expected. So stick around and we'll get started with a touch-up bit of painting and installing all the windows and doors. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in part one, under painting, are the lintels and the window sills and the lintel over the doors, that kind of thing. These were typically either cut stone, so you might have granite or limestone or sandstone, if it was readily available. But that was typically only used on your more expensive buildings, like your courthouses, your post offices, things like that, some expensive office buildings. On an industrial building like this, they were typically just cast concrete. So I've got my little bottle of concrete paint here, and so by hand I'm going to paint every one of these sills and lintels on this building. And it's not too bad on this building. On the other building, it added up to quite a bit. So I'm going to start into that, get that done, and when I get finished, then we'll go ahead and start working on inserting all of the windows and doors into the kit. Okay, let's take a close look at the painting process because this is not easy. One thing I'll show you, these lintels here are barely raised above the surface of the brick, whereas the window sills are raised up. So it's fairly easy to paint these with a very fine tip brush. This is a 0 size brush, so it's a very fine tip, and you can easily just run a line along these. I also keep some of these little small brushes. I've seen these at Hobbytown in small packages. I got these online from, I believe, eBay, and they're makeup brushes. They use them for eyelining and stuff like that in beauty shops. So I got like about 1,000 of them for $5, so a lifetime supply. But they can get in there, and if you get some paint on the surface, you can easily pick it out very quickly with one of these. But then, what I do for the lintels, because they are very low relief, is I cut out these pieces of the frog tape, the masking tape, and cut them in half, and then applied them right at the top of the lintels. And that way you can go ahead, brush on a layer of paint without any concern about getting it down onto the bricks. Now, unfortunately, it's very difficult right in between them. So on these, you just kind of have to work it like this and give it a good straight brush. And do that. You're going to have to do this 2 or even 3 times to get complete coverage. So I think these are done now. I just hand painted these. So let's see how they look. Okay, so there's a little bit there. So you can see I didn't get quite a good contact right above the lintel. So I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and clean that off. There, that's better. And then later I'll come back with a small paintbrush and some red oxide paint and give it a good clean edge there with the paint. So you got to be careful with this stuff. It will chip off, and I'm applying acrylic over the enamel. So that's what that one came out pretty good, and this one there was just a little bit. So this is going to be on the end, and probably you'll never see it. I've got both ends done, you can see. After you've done a few of these, you'll get much, much better at it. So I suggest that you start with the ends, and particularly the end that's going to be hidden and not visible to the front aisle. And that way it'll give you a chance to get a good steady hand and a feel for how best to go about applying this concrete paint. On the front, I'm going to be a little bit more careful. I'll probably mask a lot tighter to the window sills and lintels. Okay, so as you can see now, I have the lintels and the window sills all painted. That's a bit of a meticulous process. You just have to be willing to sit there and just keep working at that. I think I did it 2 or 3 times on each one of these little guys. So, but, you know, it really adds a lot to the building kit once you do that. You could put this together without painting it at all, or you could just paint everything one color and put it together, or you can go the extra effort to add more of the details. Okay, so now I've got that together. I've started adding some of the windows. So the window frames just sit right into the opening there, and they have a little locator edge. Now for my cement, I use Plastrix Bondine, and that does a very good job of cutting through the paint and making a good cement joint here. It melts that styrene together and it holds fairly well. And then after you get the window frames in place, then you place the window glass pieces on top of that and run a bead of Bondine around the edge. And you have to hold this in place because the glass sections, they do not have any kind of a locator, pin, or ledge or anything. They just kind of sit there and you hold them without moving them while while you're applying the Plastrix Bondine. Okay, so I got those done. Another thing that I've started here are the doors. So you can see I've installed the loading dock doors, and they're pretty easy. They do have a locator edge in there, so you pop them into place, hit them with that Plastrix Bondine, and you can see right here a little bit where it's cut through. There's some brown showing through from that original plastic. So it does a pretty good job of cutting in there. This little guy here is one of the supports. This roof here will eventually be placed right like that. So there's several of these supports. I just got that one in there for a test. So we got that done. And so now I just need to do a lot more of windows here. These doors are in place. These windows and a doorway need to be done here. So I've got that to do. Pretty easy job as far as that goes. So there's nothing difficult about this. It's just time consuming if you really want a nicely finished job. One thing I do want to show you about about painting things black here. I told you the reason I do that is because I don't want any hot spots. So I've got this LED flashlight here, and I'll show you right here. I've got it behind the brick, and you can see there's nothing bleeding through there. Now watch when I move it down onto the doors. That's what I call a hot spot. And if you put lights inside of a building, you'll get that bleed through there. So that's what a hot spot is. So you don't see it here, and you don't see it there because I've painted it black. And that dense black paint prevents that light from coming through. So what I'm going to do is, now that after I've installed these, I can go back and hand paint these a nice dense black paint. I won't spray paint it, but I will use a wide brush and hit it with the black paint. And that'll prevent that bleed through effect. And you want to do that, you know, on all the sides and the roof so that you don't get that bleed through. Let's install a few windows here just as a demonstration. So actually I've got a door, I've got a long skinny window, and I've got this one here that is 3 windows in a row. So they just molded it as one single window unit. So that makes it easier. And then I've got several pieces of glass that go with it. So it's hard to see that, I'm sure, but there it is, clear styrene. And I've got my bottle of Bondine. So let's begin down here with the door. This door has a molded in edging raised area, and that fits into the slot here for the insert. So that gets it properly located. So we're just going to pop that right into place and get it down in there. And if you look real close, you can see now you got the door and then you got the light above it. And then just run the bonding along the edge. And that's going to go into the crevice there. And I'm going to turn this on its side to get it down in here. And that's going to go down in there and get that plastics, that styrene, melted together and form a permanent bond. Now the next thing, this is a window, a small window, and if you look at your windows, you can see that there is a lower section that is recessed above the upper pane here. So make sure you look at that, because the raised section goes on the top and the recessed pane goes on the bottom. That's how they are in your house, assuming you have windows with sashes like these. So again, we'll put that in place and hit it with the bonding. And because I've got all this paint in the way, I am very liberal with my bonding applications, because I don't want these things falling out later on. Okay, so we got 2 of those in place. Now, these windows, they're the same way. There's a raised pane and a recessed pane. So I'm going to put that like that. They go in just like this, with the recessed pane towards the bottom. And again, hit it with the bonding. One of the problems I have now is the local hobby town, which was the last hobby shop in Asheville, was flooded out in Hurricane Helene, and they just announced recently that they are not going to reopen. So I think the closest hobby town is somewhere over in Tennessee or down in either Greenville or some other locations down in Tennessee. So hopefully I can get this stuff through the mail. They'll probably have to ship it ground. And then finally, here's the last one. Got to make sure I get them in right. So there we go, another one. And we'll get that one done. So fortunately, I have 2 bottles, full bottles of bonding here, and I'll probably use both of them up in all of these kits I'm putting together, because it's going to take a bit to get all these windows in here. And the other kit that I've got to put together is bigger than this one, with more windows. Okay, so there we've got these done. So while these are setting up, let me go ahead and put the glass in place down here. So it's just the piece of styrene, and you place it on the top of the window insert. And as I said, it does not have any kind of locator pin or raised edge or anything. So I'm going to hold it in place and run a line of bonding here and here and get it set up like that, and then leave it alone while the styrene cement does its job. Okay, and then I'll put this one. Now this one over here, it's the same long skinny piece of glass that was used over here. And again, it's tricky holding this. That doesn't hold it in place. I'll just try not to wiggle here. There we go. So that one's done, and then we'll get this piece in place. Let me flip it over, like so. And I'll hold that with my finger and put on a layer of bonding here. Now, for this, I think that the brush works very well. So I'm not using my applicator that I've used in previous videos, which is still available from Micromark. So if you check Micromark and look under needle applicators, you'll find a really neat little applicator. And unfortunately, both of mine are upstairs somewhere, so I will have to show you that later when we're gluing together the building sections. I will use it for that. But here, I think it's just easier to use the brush because you can apply a lot more bonding with the brush. I'm not sure that's a good thing. Put it in like that and like that. Okay, so that's that section done, and you can see this is the other section that I showed you previously, and so those are all in there pretty good and tight. So as you can see, it builds into a fairly convincing window there. And if you look, you can see that I've got different colors or shades of the brick red. So here I used more of the primer. This has a little bit more of the darker color. There's more darker in here and here and here. So it's quite a bit of a random variation in the brick color there. So I'm going to let these dry, and I've got to get busy doing the larger section. And then once that's done, then we can start putting all of this together. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. So we've made a lot of progress with the construction of the kit. All of these windows and doors are in place now, and I think it's just about ready for us to start putting all of the walls together and the roof and the side, all of that, and we'll be able to finalize the kit and do a little bit of weathering before we plop it down on the module. And that will come in the next video, which will be on Monday, I believe, assuming everything goes well over the weekend. In the meantime, have a great weekend, and I'll see you here next week with that video on the final assembly of the building and a little bit of weathering. Bye now.